It says live.
Yeah, it's just rolling the stream right now. So I think it'll may just take a second for Facebook to suck it in. But
Uh,
awesome. But yeah, we're streaming. We're live, baby.
Not easy.
You guys, you missed out on the kickoff of this quick conversation because we had tech issues and Jennifer's dog Elvis is he had to do his welcome first. So all right,
Yeah.
so before we get kicked off, there's probably not a person on the planet that doesn't know who you are, but just in case, I'm gonna just introduce you. Jennifer Batten, you know, from the travels and videos and tours with Michael Jackson. You probably also saw her with Jeff Beck and a handful of other notable artists. We are blessed to have her up here in the Northwest, and I'm blessed to be considering her a friend. I want to share a little bit about my appreciation for who Jennifer Batten is, and you guys can be aware, listening, and we have some questions also for you. So I just I'm gonna silence my phone, stop the calls from coming in here, and with no further ado, I would love to introduce to you Jennifer Batten and her pup Elvis.
Howdy. This is Elvis. He has control issues, don't you, Elvis?
Is he a drummer?
No words.
It's good that he's here to help answer any questions you don't feel like answering. So
yes,
you've got your steampunk vibe behind you. So tell me a little bit about what's going on right behind you.
Yeah, is the backdrop for my steampunk band, Jennifer Batten in Full Steam. And unfortunately, I was not able to launch it because the lockdown happened right after I got these. We were supposed to, I think we should have done several shows by now with these for a backdrop, but it's all about the gears, about the gears, about the gears.
That's right. Yeah. You were into steampunk before you started the band up, right? So
yeah, I've gotten into several things that I don't even know. I'm not conscious of when they got in my head. Like when I got into stained glass, I just woke up and I must do glass. I must cut glass. And the steampunk thing was the same way. It just entered my consciousness in my sleep, and all of a sudden, everything steampunk, really? Fantasy airships and gears, and that's been going for years now.
And this is not like something you saw somebody else do and you were tripped out, but this is something that really came to you in your sleep.
I'm not conscious of how it got to me, but all of a sudden it was there, and it still hasn't let up. In fact, I got a half sleeve not that long ago with some gears and time machines, and yeah, that's for another outfit.
Yeah, no kidding. I won't have you disrobe at this point, but
no,
that's a podcast that people pay for.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You and the stained glass thing, same deal. I mean, you did a lot. You did shows. You were selling your stained glass on Etsy, and you had some shows as well. And I saw the piece that you gave to Jeff Beck for his wedding, which is freaking badass. But
yeah, that was a 32 Roadster that, gosh, it was about this big. It took about 50 hours to do it. And his logo is a yellow Roadster, like the one that was in American Graffiti. Right. He's all about that. And so I did it for a surprise and for the engine, because it's difficult to do an engine in stained glass. I did it upside down fender headstock, so the tuning pegs stick up out of it.
Oh, that's rad.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell a little bit about the time that you presented it to him for his wedding?
There's not much to it other than I showed up and said, here. I was just glad to have it out of my hands, because trying to take glass through airports is kind of a drag.
Yeah.
And I definitely didn't want to ship it, because it would have been in a million pieces. So
presenting in person.
He put it in his window.
He did.
Huh?
You got proof of that he's got it up and on display?
I'm sure there's pictures in some hard drive that I'll never see again that's got cobwebs on it.
Yeah. Well, the story about you giving it to him was not just the presentation of the stained glass, but the whole wedding reception is a fun story. Actually, hold that thought. Let's go back a little bit. Right? Do you mind me talking a little bit about history? I know that you get asked from every guitar magazine in the world about this kind of stuff, but for me, I'm fascinated by the idea of your transition to LA and your pursuit of rock stardom there. You want to talk about high school days and
Go ask anything you want.
All right. First gig.
My first gig, that was good. I made $12.50. It was a jazz guitar duet, and we were playing tunes out of the real book, like Satin Doll or I don't know, Jobim tunes, and that actually that scarred me because we had rehearsed or jammed really for months going over tunes, and all of a sudden when you have an audience you realize how lame it is to have your nose in a book. You know, to
Yeah.
not have the stuff memorized. So that was a turning point to internalize tunes to another level.
How old were you?
21.
Oh, really? That was your first gig, 21.
Yeah, man, my mother
Wow.
wouldn't let me go out and play with strangers before that.
Really smart.
And I tried, man. There was a local music store that long before the internet had a Rolodex for local musicians. And when you wanted to put a band together, you just go there and look for instruments and people and call them up and get together. And I was so excited when I saw that. And I brought a bunch of names and numbers home. And my mother said, "You're not going to go out and play with strangers."
Especially drummers.
Yeah. I was a closet player until I was 21.
Wow. So when did you start playing guitar then?
When I was 8.
Okay. So you had
Yeah.
like a good chunk of time like shedding before you actually stepped on stage.
Yeah. Well, at 8 years old, it was the Mel Bay books, learning how to read on the first 3 frets. And the family moved several times and I ended up with different teachers. Gosh, when we first moved west, I ended up with a guy that was kind of a folk strummer guy that taught me a lot of different finger picking patterns. And then we moved again and I ended up with a blues guy and then a rock guy. And, you know, all that time I had learned techniques and tunes and the blues scale, playing along with B.B. King records. And then when I tried to get into Musicians Institute, I flunked because I didn't have the tools of the trade. I didn't know diatonic scales or chord scales. I just knew tunes. So I had to go back and woodshed with a great jazz player named Peter Sprague that's in San Diego. And he had me learning Chet Baker trumpet solos and learning chord melodies. And it was really intense. I practiced a lot. And 6 months later, I was able to get in the school.
Okay. So how old were you when you got into like MI?
20.
Okay. And you moved out, were you in New York before that?
No, I grew up in upstate New York, but the family moved to San Diego when I was 9.
Okay. Wow. That's I was gonna say it's funny because every guitarist that I know, that talks about Jennifer Batten is, many guitarist friends of mine have seen you at MI doing clinics and workshops and that kind of thing. And so their first experience getting to see you live was down at Musicians Institute. And you became, sort of an idol to a lot of these people, right? And so I know you're very humble about it, but it's a big deal. And it's not just local musicians or people that I've played with around, but there are so many people that I've come across at like world-class level that have so much respect for you and admiration. We talked about the Vi, talking to Steve Vai at the Roseland, and he was bummed that you weren't at the show because he loved your playing. And I think in 2005, I was with Animotion and we played with Peter Frampton, and I was talking to him backstage, and he was playing with John Regan on bass. And I had just been doing some gigs with Eddie Martinez, and John, I knew, had played with Eddie with Nile Rodgers at the Power Station in New York. And so John was like, "Oh wow, man, you played with Eddie Martinez. That's so cool." And I said, "Yeah, man, it's amazing that these two world-class guitarists are living in Portland, right? Jennifer and Eddie Martinez." And I said, "I've been playing with Jennifer Batten lately." And Peter was there in the room. We were smoking cigars in this little lounge, and Peter's like, "Wait a minute, you play with Jennifer Batten?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Dude, that girl is the most underrated guitarist on the planet." And
wow,
I was so giddy, right? Because like these guys, of course, Frampton, world-class dude. And I know how badass you are, but it was fun to hear these guys appreciate your, and respect you that much too. So,
wow, that's a trip about Peter. I didn't know he even knew who I was. I saw him, I think last summer.
Really? Yeah.
He played at McMenamin's Edgefield. Yeah.
Right. His last tour, right? That was the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I know that there are a million other guys on the planet that are like that, that respect you and admire you. And so I'm thinking about those days when you went to MI. Did you have a couple of guitarists in mind that you just were at the top of your sort of bucket list that either you loved and admired or wanted to play with someday?
Yeah. Oh God, when I first went in, I became a jazz head. So not that I wanted to play with them, but guys like Pat Martino and Joe DiOrio was one of the teachers at the school that I just adored. Um, Guys like that were monstrous. And when I was at the school, Al Di Meola was like the shredder guy. You know, later it was Yngwie. There's always one shredder that's at the top of every generation.
Right.
Uh, and then also Larry Carlton and Lee Ritenour were just busting out with their fusion stuff. So, you know, I never thought of playing with any of them. And Jeff Beck was always at the top of the heap, and I never thought of playing with him either. I just wanted an autograph, you know. When I finally made contact, I got my autograph and thought that was the end of it. But no.
Yeah. A couple of tours and albums and paychecks came along with it, huh?
Yeah. He's a generous dude, I will say too.
That's
my dog is snoring down here.
I thought that was just I thought it was boring. Yeah. We you know what, we can get to the Jeff Beck thing, but tell I mean, you want to give a little bit of a background on how things transitioned. You were at MI, you finally got in. How did the Michael Jackson thing come about?
Well, I was teaching at MI at the time. I was teaching everywhere. I was teaching 6-7 days a week at different music stores and out of my apartment, and a couple days a week at MI. And they had a musicians referral service. So when people were looking for players for bands, a lot of people would go to the referral service and get kids fresh out of school. And I was lucky enough to hear about the auditions. I think they just asked for a couple people from there because they auditioned a ton of people in town. And so I asked when the last possible time I could go down and audition would be, so I could just cancel everything and stay home and work on tunes. And 2 or 3 days later, I went in. And fortunately, it wasn't a cattle call. You know, there wasn't 50 people hanging there waiting for their turn. It was scheduled. So I worked on a bunch of tunes, but when I got there was no band. It was just me and a video camera. Wow. And the only guidance I was given was to play some funky rhythm stuff. So I did that, and I actually released some of that footage on my latest storytelling playlist that is called Cat Saw This One Time a Cat. And yeah, I put some of that. I got a hold of that rehearsal footage like 4 or 5 years ago. I hadn't seen it since it was shot. So I played some funky rhythm. Then I started soloing. I played the Giant Steps tapping solo that I worked out that ended up on my first record. And I ended with the Beat It solo because I had been playing that in a cover band for, gosh, since it came out, maybe 1984. So I maybe longer than that. I don't know, but I loved the solo. So I finished the audition with that.
That was Lukather that did that record, that recording, right?
He played the rhythm guitar.
Oh, and then Eddie on the solo?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Luke, I think Luke came up with it. Yeah. I think that was his composition, if it wasn't written before he came in. But yeah, he and the Porcaro brothers were all over that record. And then Eddie came in to blow the solo, and, you know, thinking that nobody from Van Halen would know that he did it. They were all on vacation, right? Right. And they had a pact that only the band members would only work on Van Halen material. And so Eddie was a naughty boy when he went out to do this session for Quincy. Wow. He thought nobody would know, but it became one of the biggest tunes in history.
No kidding, man. Yeah.
Psych.
Iconic solo. Yes, ripping. When you said that you didn't get much direction on the video camera, that they said just go ahead and play some funky rhythm stuff. When you came up and played Giant Steps and you played that Beat It solo, did you just whip it out, or did they say, can you do anything else that's more like flamboyant? Or
not at all. No, they just let me go.
Really? All right.
Yeah, I played probably not more than 5 minutes, but just one thing after another. And, you know, at that time in LA, because of Van Halen, I think every single band had a solo spot for the guitar player to just go off. And I was in 5 different bands before I got hired by Michael. I mean, 5 at the same time in LA,
Yeah.
doing original stuff. And I think every single one of them I had solo spots. So that was kind of comfortable to do.
God, and that was mid 80s when you were doing those other bands.
Yeah.
All right. So you were in the Sunset Strip era, doing the deal, playing all the clubs, the Whiskey, the Troubadour, all those.
Yep. Yeah. And there was usually at least 3 bands a night. Just bam, bam, bam. Bring all your gear in, do your thing. Hope somebody that matters sees you, which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And teaching during the day. So there wasn't a lot of time at home.
Wow.
I was either rehearsing or teaching or gigging.
That's man, amazing. Like, were you nervous when you did that audition? I mean, without a band there, it must have been kind of a trip.
I probably was nervous to a degree, but compared to if Michael had been there,
Right. Yeah.
I would have been crapping myself, you know.
Totally.
So just me and a video camera was probably the most relaxing way I could have done it.
Okay.
I mean, even with a band, I would have been worried about, you know, the levels and who these new people are that I hadn't played with before.
Right.
So I was fairly relaxed as it would go auditioning for the biggest gig on planet Earth.
Right. And then how long until you got the word?
I never got the word. They called me a few days later and said Michael was interested, and why don't you come down and play with the band and see how it goes, and can you take a year and a half off? And I said, oh, hell yes. Take me anywhere for any length of time. So I started rehearsing with the band, and we rehearsed for a month. Nobody said I had the gig. It's just nobody was firing me, you know? And then the second month, we all got together in a giant soundstage with Michael. In fact, I think we met him a day or 2 before we moved over to the soundstage. And we had heard that if he was happy with the band, he'd start dancing. And luckily, he started dancing immediately.
Right on.
And one by one, the people that didn't know him already met him. And that's something that's just burned in my head.
Wow.
You know, I was like 2 feet away from him, shook his hand, and he was absolutely radiant. And he came in with Frank DeLeo, the cigar smoking manager at that time.
God, you mentioned the radiance when he came in. He's one of those people, right? That on the planet, there are very few people that sort of embody that kind of energy, right? And you wonder, I mean, where that came from, right? I know he was a tiny kid when he started in the business, but he had that thing that hardly anybody ever has had. But you could feel it. You could just feel this like vibe whenever he's in the room. You just
man, he was a creative tornado, absolutely. And even the stories of when he was a little kid, you know, that the Jackson 5 would be opening up for James Brown or something, and the rest of his brothers were off backstage eating bologna or whatever, and Michael's on the side of the stage just glued to James Brown, watching his moves. Wow. And just sponging that up.
God, man.
Yeah. And he was just super open. I mean, every possible form of creativity, whether it's visual, dance, music, lyrics. Karen Fay, his makeup artist, said that he'd be in the makeup chair and always jotting down lyrics. It was always streaming through him.
Wow. Yeah. Just with the people that are peripheral to him, like the makeup artist and the choreography people. And I mean, did you develop friendships and relationships with a lot of those people? Because it was a big camp, right?
There was 100 people in the entourage.
Oh
yeah. You know, all the performers still, well, pretty much keep in touch. I haven't talked to Sheryl Crow in years, but I have talked to the other background singers, Dorian Holley, Daryl Finnessy, and especially the dancers were super friendly. And I reconnected with Lavelle Smith, who was Michael's choreographer for many videos. We reconnected in Brazil with an impersonator named Rodrigo Teaser. And that was just a gas. He was one of my faves anyway. So it was just a fun, silly time.
You know, you mentioned Sheryl. I know that a lot of people that aren't really into the scene realize that Sheryl Crow was a background singer for Michael during that time, right?
Yeah, she sang at that time. I think it was "I Just Can't Stop Loving You." She sang that duet with Michael.
Wow, that's cool. Did you get close
Yeah.
at all on the road with her?
Well, we shared a dressing room
Okay.
together because there was the only two females of all the performers, so it made sense. And all the females, the makeup artists and some wardrobe people, we all shared a bus together too.
Okay.
So we would travel after the shows to the next cities, and there was usually some shenanigans going on. So,
She stole your hair product and that kind of thing.
just pranks,
Yeah.
just endless pranks. Yeah.
Anything you want to share? Any fun ones?
You know what? One prank I already put out in my YouTube channel, but it's the one that stands out. And at the airport, I bought this little fake mouse that had a tube and an air bladder, and I thought it was a great idea to scare the shit out of the stewardess. They were called stewardess back then. And I saw her walking down the aisle of a flight. And I hit the air bladder and the mouse jumped and she screamed. And success. We were always doing stuff like that. If it was post 9/11, I'd probably be in jail.
Yeah, probably. Were you guys on a private plane, or was this just you guys like flying commercial?
We did commercial on all the tours except for the history tour. The history tour was in Europe. The promoter was Romanian, though he lived in Germany. And he arranged for some Romanian planes that we were in, which, you would think, oh, how cool is that? But it only meant because it was private, all the roadies could smoke on the plane. That sucked. I hated it.
God, you never went through that smoking phase.
Ugh, yeah, no. I think I smoked 2 cigarettes in my life, and it fortunately didn't stick, and both my parents died from it. So I'm very anti-tobacco.
Amen.
Yeah.
Michael probably wasn't even on those flights with you guys, because I doubt he's around the smoking roadies during that time.
he wouldn't have been. No.
Yeah.
He when he could, he preferred to take a van. Obviously from LA to Romania or wherever we ended up, he would fly commercial.
That's a long van ride.
But if it wasn't ridiculous, go ahead.
He'd fly commercial.
It broke up one more time.
Yeah, Michael would fly commercial with you.
Yeah. He had one of his security guards. I only remember first names. His name was Chucky, and the guy was 6'7" to start with, and probably 350 pounds. He was like a football player, and he wore a top hat on top of that. So, if Michael had the window seat and Chucky was sitting next to him, nobody would see him.
Yeah.
And he was just always reading anyway. So, yeah, he never got bothered, I don't think.
He was pretty private, right, in a lot of his life, from what you hear. Do you feel like you got close enough to just consider him friend?
No.
Yeah.
We didn't hang out. Once we were on the road, we were in separate hotels. There was 100 people. So the roadies usually traveled ahead of us, and we'll start setting up the stage before we even traveled to the next city. Michael and the security guys and maybe his wardrobe guy were at his hotel, and all the performers were at another hotel.
Wow. And
every once in a while we would get booked in his hotel, and at first I thought, what a drag, we're not going to be hanging out partying. But when we were booked at his hotel, that was a drag, because his fans would be outside all night long singing Billie Jean outside his window. And anytime any of us went anywhere, we would be followed and photographed, and people would sit at the next table at a restaurant or be following us around bookstores and stuff. So we got a sliver of what it was like to be that famous, and no thanks.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's almost that way when you're at Powell's downtown Portland, I know, but I think I should probably mention here that I unfortunately hit you with a barrage of these kind of questions when you and I first started playing together years ago. It's fascinating to me, and I know that you've had to tell so many of the stories over and over again, and so one of the things that I thought was real cool about your transition in performing locally was that you would do these house concerts, right? People could book you and have this intimate concert with Jennifer Batten where you bring in your multimedia show and you've got 50, 60, 100 people in a room, and they get to hear these behind the scenes stories and also what went into your production and performance and recording. And, you know, I think a lot of people have been really blessed to have this connection with you. And it's really cool that you make yourself available to them. So I'd love to get into that more in this,
Yeah.
you know, later on to just talk about the future of that and how as the pandemic ends here and you can actually you have less social distance space that people can get some of Jennifer Batten time. But there are some stories that you've mentioned about Michael Jackson that just cracked me up, man. The stories of the outfits, the way they got more and more crazy and preposterous. You want to touch on a couple of those freaking bizarro stories?
Yeah, sure. Oh,
Yeah.
well,
How about the Chinese dragon train?
oh yeah, that was a disaster. Somebody thought it was a great idea if they made a dragon to fit over my shoulders for when I played Beat It. And they put some fiber optic fibers in it that would light up. I think that was a dangerous tour, actually. Fortunately, somebody had the foresight to make an alternative costume, because although it fit me perfectly, and they did this mold of my chest and shoulders to have like nobody else could wear that dragon. I only used it about 2 or 3 nights, and I remember somebody saying, "You look really unhappy out there." It was,
well, didn't you have a whole bunch of people behind you fought with the train of the dragon?
there would have to be somebody making sure that the fibers, that it would go from the costume to a computer, and they would change the colors of light as I walked across the stage. So somebody was there to make sure it didn't get caught on stuff. But yeah, it was so heavy. I felt like my back was going to break, and then I'm trying to play the Beat It solo, which is not easy either. So
walking around with it.
Yeah, it was a slice of hell. Plus they really didn't have enough fibers in it to be super brilliant, or maybe there was just too much lighting on stage for it to really pop and make a difference. That reminds me of when I did a shoot for a song on my own record where I was doing a fire walk, and we got a camera crew up this mountain, and they had the coals burning for hours, and I'm psyching myself up to do this. I saw the footage, everything was overlit, so it just looked like I was walking on dirt.
Oh no. Oh, but you did it. You walked on the coals.
I did. And no matter how much I psyched myself up, it fucking hurt.
Oh my God.
The things you try to do to sell records, cover yourself with bees and walk on hot coals.
Yeah, the bees thing, man. You had 100,000 bees on you for the Flight of the Bumblebee video?
Approximately. Yeah. Wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. But those are all on YouTube. How about the firewalk?
It never made it. We actually did do a whole other shoot, but I don't think it was ever released. I can't even remember what song that was for.
Oh my God. Yeah. Some of these stories I didn't know yet. So this is fun for me to get these, but I want to know where the dragon is. Where's the dragon? Get all
it's probably collecting dust in a warehouse somewhere. The alternate costume was much more pleasant. It was a super lightweight, probably foam, made out of foam, Viking horns.
Oh, I saw the Viking horns.
Yeah.
I thought that was an elk antler thing that you had going on.
Actually, that's what it was. Yeah. I've been calling it Viking horns all these years.
but they're like antlers with like lights strung on them. And
yeah.
God.
Yeah, it was the same thing with fiber optics, so the lights would change as I played the solo.
You think like the Michael Jackson estate still has all that stuff?
Oh, dude, I have no idea. Yeah. He ended up with so much stuff. I mean, everywhere he went, people would give him gifts, and a lot of the gifts were paintings of him. And I would see them. We'd all get together before shows and do a group prayer, and I would see all this stuff stacked up or on easels or something. And when you do 4 months worth of shows with people showing up with that stuff, I mean, he must have paid a bundle to ship that stuff back home. And you know, you're not going to put all that stuff up on your own walls.
Right.
He made kind of a museum at the LA family home.
Really?
I never saw it, but you know, gold records and that sort of thing. So he might have had a painting or two there.
Wow. Then, did you end up going out to the ranch?
No, I never did.
Never did.
No,
Yeah.
I went to, it was on Havenhurst Street. That's the one that was in LA. That was the family property. I went there once to pick up some document or something, and it looked like Disneyland inside,
Oh,
because all of the plants were carved into animal shapes. That was kind of cool, but I never got inside the home or the museum or anything.
Wow. But you've got more memories, I'm sure, than most anybody in his camp, other than, you know, close family. But that'll be for your book one of these days, huh?
Yeah.
How did things happen with Jeff Beck then? Was that the next big sort of evolution in your music performance?
Yeah, it wasn't that long after the history tour ended that Jeff called me to come and play. And honestly, at that point, I was so burnt out with travel and just feeling really beat up. And when he called, I said, man, I can't believe you're calling. I was thinking of getting out of the music business. And he goes, oh, well, can you wait?
Just postpone that?
Yeah, I did.
And
so I went out.
How'd he find you?
Oh, I tracked him down. On the Bad tour, one of the keyboard players had done some tech work for him with Jan Hammer early on, maybe the Wired period, I think. And he said, oh, you're into Jeff, I'll introduce you. And he didn't. So the next tour that came along, the Dangerous tour, that was my number one goal of that tour, was to meet Jeff and get an autograph. So every show that we did, I would track down the Sony reps that were hanging around and say, man, I want to get Jeff into a show. Does anybody have any connection? And finally somebody came through and he got VIP passes to a show at Wembley Stadium. And 2 opening acts went on, and then Michael canceled the show. And right after he canceled the show and right after it was announced, Jeff showed up and he was turned away at the gate. So,
Wait,
you know, bullet to the head. Huh?
Who turns Jeff Beck away at the gate? Is it just because the show was
security.
off?
Yeah, the show was off. Yeah. So I called him up and said, you know what, I don't know when or if they're going to make up the show, but can I meet you anyway? And he was totally cool. I went, I think the next day, I ended up going to a studio he was recording his rockabilly record at.
Oh, wow.
And I had, you know, back then you had these big honking video cameras. So I took one because I never thought I'd see him again, you know.
Yeah.
And I asked him during a break, I asked him to play Blue Wind, because I had memorized all the solos on the Wired record and the Blow by Blow record. And at one point I could nail them all back to back to back. And he played Blue Wind, and, you know, 4 bars into it, the camera dies, battery's gone. And me being super smart, brought a spare battery. I put it in, 4 more bars, that one died.
Oh, no. God, you still have that footage?
Oh, you know, I have so much stuff I haven't seen in 20, 30 years.
I
got it somewhere.
It's the time to find that shit, man. We're sitting around waiting for the pandemic to end, right? So
yeah, well, I'm trying to figure out how to make a living. That's where my time's going.
Yeah, man. You know what? Maybe that's a good time to talk about this. After the Jeff Beck stuff, when you played with Jeff Beck here in town, I had a bunch of friends that saw you. I wasn't able to go to that show, but you played the Schnitz here. And some buddies of mine saw the show, got a hold of me, and they said, oh my God, band across the board. They talked about how badass the band was, right? But there were a guitarist and a bass player, John McIsaac on bass, and Matt Franklin on guitar, that saw you play there and were shitting bricks. And so shortly after that, I think is when you ran into them at Jimmy Mac's, you were trying to put together a band in town. You were looking for a drummer, and John, I believe, was the one that you talked to. You said you were looking for somebody that was more rock Bonham kind of vibe, I think. And he said, oh yeah, call Kevin Rankin. And I didn't know about that piece until after I got the call, and I said, this is not Jennifer Batten. And you're like, well, I can call somebody else. That's cool. And I'm like, no, wait, like, I'll do this. And I remember you asking me about this gig. You said, I got a gig coming up in Baltimore. We were going to do a performance at Towson University for the World Guitar Congress. And I immediately jumped at the opportunity to do that without having heard your records, and shit my pants exponentially when I heard the Momentum Tribal Rage record. But that was your foray into Portland. You moved here, you put a band together, and kind of moved out of town. Just wanted some peace and serenity, get out of LA, right? I knew that you had kind of looked around here afterwards, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I remember you got family here in the state that kind of introduced you to the cool vibe of the scene, and seemed like a good place to escape from California and the hubbub, right?
Yeah, man, I wanted to be, after 20 years in LA, I wanted to be anywhere but LA.
Yeah.
I just didn't dig it. And I tell people 20 years is about 19 too many.
Yeah.
You know, it's a really stressful place to be, and you spend half your life in traffic, and it's hard to get together with friends because they're so busy, and it takes an hour to get anywhere. And I bought books on 4 different cities, and one of them was Portland, and my sister had moved to Corvallis, and I read all the books, and Portland made the most sense. I was a little afraid of the rain, because coming from the desert,
Yeah.
you know, where rain is a big deal,
Right.
you know, I thought it might be depressing, but the first thing I did was to get full spectrum lights, and I love the rain now. I
Yeah.
love going to sleep with the rain, and I love the, you know, the smells that come out of the wilderness from it. In fact, I remember when I was looking for my house, I'm really near the forest, and I would open my front door, and my senses, it just smelled like Christmas. It smelled like Christmas trees to me.
Yeah.
The evergreens are wonderful, and LA just smells like poop.
Yeah. Well, right now, you've seen the pictures and the videos, right? Is it crazy to see how clean?
Yes.
Oh my God. That's one of the blessings, right, that we can look at right now. If there's some silver lining to this pandemic, is seeing how less polluted our environment is, and those cities have vibrancy, right? I mean, these animals, deer that are rolling around the streets of LA, right? And it's nice to see. But yeah, I love it where you're at too. And I grew up in the mountains in Montana, and I took that shit for granted, right? I lived in a cabin in the woods, and I couldn't wait to go to LA. And I look at that now. I go up there, and I think, the things that you really think you know at 17, right? But you know, there are pros and cons. I love it here in Portland, you know, but I'm still looking for Canadian citizenship, so that's all right. But you transitioned to Portland, you put a band together. Was it your hope that you could just kind of be a little bit more obscure in the way that you're doing performances, do gigs for yourself that were fulfilling, or were you still kind of hoping to get out there and do some of the big profile gigs like Beck? And
well, I finally came to the realization that all I needed was an airport. And so why would I be going through hell traffic to get to LAX, and all the surly, nasty people down there? It's just so unpleasant, when I could go out of the Portland airport. And had I known how wonderful an airport it was years ago, I might have left earlier. But it was just super weird to see people smiling and helpful. You know, that just wasn't my experience. And I mean, even it was a joy to even go to the post office, because there's one guy that would always be joking with you. And when you're in a smaller town, people are more open to having conversations. And I remember I was up here for 2 years, and I went back for a NAMM show, and I just remember instant road rage for one thing. Right. You know, if you accidentally cut somebody off, somebody's like right in front of you immediately. And I remember taking the rental car back, and I had been opened up, and I just started joking with the guy behind the counter, and it was just like, nothing. Do not communicate with me. And I thought, thanks for the reminder that getting out of here was the right move for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I would wonder if places like that, where people were sort of shut off and guarded, if things are a little bit different now. You know, I mean, there is sort of a social shift, right, with pandemic, that maybe taking things a little letting people come in a little bit more from what I see. I see more smiles and friendships, but I haven't been traveling internationally or even nationally for the last couple of months. But I know that people's conversations are warmer now, and you wonder if LA and New York and some of these more sort of guarded places are less harsh, you know.
Well, there's nothing like having to look at your own mortality to put a new perspective on things.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
the status quo is history, and who knows what's going to happen from here. So I think people automatically take a bird's eye view of their lives and perspective, and what are we doing on this planet? Are you happy doing what you're doing?
Right.
Now, for a lot of people, it's about survival, not what's the next concert I can go see.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Totally. Yeah.
it's a whole anxiety shift for most of us.
You talk about perspective, and that's a big thing. You know, I know for me, uh, it's easy to kind of get swept up in the negativity, you know, that you see from social media and any kind of news type stuff. You know, people talking about political shit and environmental shit and whatever, you know, religious oppression and all that. And when all of those things are stacked up, and you can see that people are on edge anyway, it's easy to kind of absorb that energy. And so for me, I know I'm really fortunate that I have some friends that kind of guided me towards this daily reflection in the morning, where I can talk about, I just want to think about a couple of things that I need to let go right off the bat, and then things that I really appreciate for today that I can focus on. And man, a great friend of mine just sent me this text 2 days ago that said, what are 3 things that have changed in your life that you were surprised by? And it wasn't related necessarily to this pandemic, but I do see that there's been a couple of months now where people really had to change gears. Are there a couple of things that you feel like you're surprised that have been a silver lining or a positive blessing that you've seen come out of this?
Well, I tell people my perspective in this is, so it varies throughout the day between apocalypse and sabbatical.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, I have these end of the world thoughts, and thinking, okay, this is the fall of the American empire anyway. Yeah, I never would have spent the time to focus on how do you shoot a green screen.
Yeah.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
and honestly, you know, I can go out and play gigs for, I don't know, 2 months in clubs, and the audience you can get in one live stream trumps that times 10 or 20 or 1,000. The potential.
You want to use a different term?
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
I know there's so many. I mean, even the color red has been destroyed.
Right.
But we will go.
Man, no, I know. I brought us there. Sorry, I didn't mean to. You know, you talked about your vacillation between where you go from and what you go to. You go from the apocalyptic, oh my God, the world's ending kind of thing. And for me, you know, that's where I have to do the perspective shift, because I go, you know what? All of that is shit that's out of my control, man. There's nothing I can do about, you know, press conferences that happen and dictate what you should do on, you know, combating the pandemic. Or I mean, I really had to use this time to go, all right, here's my tiny circle of things that are within my control, right? And I know that I can affect my ability to educate myself on new software, or develop, you know, sort of some new skills, you know, with my craft or whatever, or learn a new craft, learn a language, spend some time with your dogs that you wouldn't have had before. You know, for me, having my kids home is immeasurably powerful, right? You know, even if they're bored out of their mind and stir crazy, it's stuff that you can't put a price tag on it. If they're being forced to hang out with their dad, I still feel blessed to have it, you know? And so you do this thing on Saturday, this Saturday night jam, they hang out with your buddies on Zoom. And I love it, man. That it's pretty much just a shoot the shit kind of experience, but it's people that you've interacted with around the world. It's really cool to see your buddy in Italy, your friends in Italy, and, you know, buddies from New York, and friends locally. it's good to get perspective from everybody and have a collective positive sort of hang for an hour just to kind of charge batteries, right?
Yeah, I mean, in part because we are social beings. I think most most creatives like a lot of alone time, but without that recharging time of connecting with people, you start to get a little stir crazy. It's
Yeah.
just not natural. So since I can't see people having, but we've had, I don't know, 6, 8, 10, 12 people show up from different parts of the world. And most of it's just silly,
Yeah.
and it's, that's fine. I mean, it's kind
Yeah.
of comic relief with in the midst of all this anxiety, and especially connecting with my friends in Italy, man. I mean, they got hit so hard, and
Yeah.
we were able to Zoom during that time. And I think it's uplifting for everybody
Yeah.
that joins in.
Don't you think, honestly, it would help a lot of people to get perspective from people that are outside their circle that way? Because they get so used to watching the news channel that they're used to, or getting the news or the information from the source that they're from, that they're accustomed to, and they talk to the same friends. But I know that if you talk to somebody that's outside this country, outside even, the state or whatever, I know talking to people in the UK and Germany, Spain are getting a perspective about this pandemic that's so different. My buddy in Australia too, and Canada. Oh my God, the way that they deal with this in Canada is so much different, and um, and just I think it helps me know. It really truly is when we talk about it being we're all in it together. But if you talk to any person on any country on any continent, they're all affected by it. A lot of people know people that have died from it. A lot of people know a lot of people have lost businesses and that kind of thing, but there is
Yeah.
the camaraderie about having that's this consistent experience. It's helpful, I think. I encourage my kids to get out there and talk to, because they do a lot of online gaming, and I said, instead of just getting lost in the game a little bit, ask them, how you guys coping with this stuff, how you talking about your feelings, because teenagers
Mm,
tendency to shut that shit down. And
sure.
my concern for a lot of people is not just lost income, but it's really the loss of self-worth and
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
the feeling of isolation and the futility you might feel when you feel like the whole world is coming to a halt, right? But there's a lot that can be done by just kind of leaning on each other a little bit, and that's
yeah,
Your Saturday night thing is perfect for that. It's just fun.
yeah, yeah.
You're anybody that hasn't met you should know that you're like seriously one of the funniest fucking people I've ever met in my life. And it's you have me rolling, but oftentimes about fart jokes and that kind of thing. But yeah, yeah,
I, yeah, I'm no stranger to pretending I'm 6 years old again.
yeah,
That's for sure. I
I,
can help.
it's good to keep the youth.
But you know what? Something I got to plug this in case my phone would die.
Yeah,
Um, Something that's gives you a new perspective is, most of us have been doing what we're doing for year after year after year after decade, and you're just in it. And you think that's what I do. I jump on planes. I land on the other side, and my guitar doesn't show up half the time, and the band didn't learn the songs, and all this stuff that's just part of your life. And to back off and go, is this how we were meant to live?
right.
Or were humans put on earth to gather money?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Right.
no, absolutely not. And that the whole idea of trading, I think, is going to come back heavy,
Yeah.
because so many people have lost everything by
Right.
not having an income. And I kind of visualize that from time to time. I think there's going to be a lot of communes that come back
Yeah.
out of necessity, because
Yeah.
people are going to need to grow their own food, and join together, where most of us are in separate houses, and you don't even know your neighbors. All of a sudden you're going to need to know your neighbors.
Big time.
you
Yeah.
know so that kind of vision is not such a bad thing.
Yeah. No, that is, again, it's a perspective that's positive. It's an optimistic look at the future, because it may or may not happen, but having the perspective on it at least is a productive way to sort of look at the future. And I you have, one thing to touch on, I mean, you talk about this shift in identity, like you were that person that gets on planes and plays guitar.
Yeah.
My friend Jana Lopez, right? She just wrote this book that's phenomenal, that was about identity shift, me, myself, and I, EYE. And it's
Nice.
this midlife conversation about grief and loss and this transition, right? Where you're what you thought was your core belief and your core self and your identity has evolved over time. A lot of times midlife, right? It changes. And
Yeah.
uh, it's almost as if we're being forced to look at that right now, even, maybe not so much that you hit midlife crisis, but this is a crisis in the world, and it's given you an opportunity to go, all right, was I happy in my last, endeavors? And if I wasn't, maybe it's time right now to look
Yeah.
at ways to diversify it. And so diversification is something you did a lot, right? You moved here, you started a band, you looked at what you wanted out of music, you got environmental sort of shift where you got to like your surroundings. You knew that you didn't necessarily want to, be part of the rat race of LA. So talk about this transition, your musical career, and you can lump your other artistic endeavors too. I want to talk to you how stained glass and steampunk art and a lot of this creative side sort of was a part of your, creative force from the time that you moved to Oregon 16 years ago.
Well, my music has evolved naturally because there's been years between records in part, and you're just bound to grow. Like I said, when I was at GIT, if graduated in 1979, I wanted to be the next Pat Martino. That's where my head was at. I wanted to be a jazz player. And I remember the first time I had a funk jam after that, it's like, wow, this feels way better.
Yeah.
That energy shifted. And so I just started meandering and just exploring as any creative should do, whether it's painting, sculpting, whatever, just trying different genres to see what really resonates with you makes sense. So I went through, one band, the first band I was in that really cut my teeth on stage was a fusion band. I saw them open up for Lee Ritenour and I go, oh yeah, I want to be in that band. And then I was. And that same band evolved and became a cover band for a while. And all of a sudden, for some reason, we were making way more money and doing weddings. And it just went back and forth and back and forth. And when I moved to LA, I ended in, I think I was in 5 bands before I got the Michael Jackson band. One of them was doing kind of more metal covers like Dokken, that sort of thing. And that was a bit new for me. I mean, I was really into Van Halen by then, but that was a kind of a new genre for me. And then I was in another band that was kind of like the Chili Peppers because nobody could sing. Boy,
yeah, don't get me
that's
started.
gonna bite me in the ass, isn't it?
Anthony Kiedis doesn't care, I would hope.
Well, what I meant to say is it was a rap band.
Oh, all right.
Because nobody could sing, and we were pretty goofy. And there was one guy that was an actor that played Daniel Boone in some series. And he had a band. He would pay us every Monday night to come to this empty bar to play because he wanted to play. And that was kind of like Bruce Springsteen kind of stuff. So I think it's really healthy to try all those different genres to see what you really like. But ultimately, Jeff Beck has been my guitar hero since I was a teenager and still is somebody to look up to. And that's been the pinnacle. And so that's probably why I part of the reason that I ended up doing instrumental on all my records, in part because I don't sing. So rather than having to rely on somebody else, and when Satriani hit and Vi hit doing the instrumental records, all of a sudden, all these guitar players go, hey, I don't need a singer. I can do this. I can play melodies. So that's what I've been doing ever since. The last record was stuff I wrote for Jeff Beck mostly. And I got a lot of vocal samples because he was getting into electronica. So that was a whole new exploration. I showed up.
That's the Whatever record.
Yeah, that's the stuff I wrote for Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he turned me on to the Prodigy and some really, we listened to some really great music during that time. It was really uplifting and took me to a new place and a new way of recording. Because it was fascinating actually when he did the You Had It Coming record. there was a really great drum programmer in the studio, and he would just come up with these killer grooves. When he had a groove, he'd send it across the hallway to Jeff and the producer, and Jeff would just react to it.
Wow.
And the producer was so quick, he would hear stuff in the improv. It was like, okay, we'll repeat that. That could be a verse, that could be a chorus, and just cut, and bam.
Wow.
That's how the record was done.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. And I was really inspired by that. And so I kind of did that for my next record. Just
okay.
seeing what happened from jamming, really.
Wow. So you've been putting out music, and not just your own music. I know that the Scherer BATTEN collaboration thing you did was really cool. You've done a lot of guest appearances on other records too. And yeah. And then your live performance. That's one thing I wanted you to touch on, is that you had to do this identity shift almost, where you're no longer just hopping on the plane. I know you still do a lot of that. A lot of stuff in Europe, man, in Japan, right? I mean, you were going to Japan when the huge tsunami hit. That was a big deal, right?
Yeah, I was there a month after Fukushima blew. I was the only foreigner that went that year in this group I was with. It was an umbrella of schools that would go all over the country for opening ceremonies for new class, and I'd play with the band and do clinics there. And man, the devastation is just phenomenal. I remember by the airport that was closest to Fukushima, there was a mound, like a mountain of rubble, except it was timber from houses that had been destroyed. God. And there was people made instruments out of that.
Really?
So yeah, that's kind of a positive side to all that nastiness. But yeah, God only knows what kind of radiation I got in me right now from being there that soon after. But what are you gonna do? You know, I figured there was the big earthquake in LA. It was 93, something like that. I've had this philosophy ever since that I'll just stay on the move, you know? Yeah. Yeah. Like... And then I moved to Portland, and that year Mount St. Helens blew.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And then I'm flying around the world with maybe the history tour or something, and Chernobyl was still in the air. It's God, you know, I think I'll just stay a moving target. Yeah,
man. But the move, I guess the moves have gotten smaller. You picked up an RV, and you were doing self-driven tours for a little bit over the years, the last handful of years too. Do you feel like that identity shift was something that you could get your music into the hands of the people without having to, you know, hop a plane? You could kind of control your own schedule, bring the animals, and yeah.
You know, after I finished the whatever record, I was thinking, okay, I've done Michael Jackson, I've done Jeff Beck tours, and what's next? And I thought, okay, it's time for me to do my own music. But the thought of putting a band together, doing instrumental music, and, you know, I remember the very time I had this vision of what it would be like. I just started hearing band members whine, like band members I still haven't met yet, that are just whining about, when are we gonna get there? You know?
Yeah.
Anybody that's ever been in a band for any length of time, you know the whiners. And it's funny, I remember one tour, the one guy that I thought was super cool in the band turned out to be the whiner, and vice versa. One guy that was always in my ear before we took off ended up being super cool on the road. So anyway, I'm thinking there's got to be a way I can at least start off alone.
Yeah.
So I came up with the idea of playing in sync with videos. And I put out the word for a year and a half to film schools and Google Ads to have filmmakers make videos for my new tracks. And after a year and a half, I only had 4 tracks with videos. And so one of the guys that made a video showed me how to do it, and I became completely obsessed. And now I have well over 3 hours of videos of content that I could do. And as long as my carry-on, I have 2 projectors, 2 laptops, and now the little amp 1, you know, 100-watt tube amp in my carry-on, as long as they can produce a screen, and sometimes it's a sheet, you know, I've done some pretty guerrilla shows time to time, or, you know, project on the side of a building even. That you saw that concert at anybody's house. Then I have a show. God. You know, I've done it many times, even when I'm traveling with a band in Europe, you can't necessarily get enough money for a whole band for every show 7 days a week.
Right.
So, the band might be parked in a hotel and the agent sends me off to Spain to go do a solo show. So I bought a motorhome to go around America and do those shows. And I put a lot of miles on that and played in a whole lot of different situations. And man, it was a really great way to see America, down to the bayous, New Orleans area, played a bunch of stuff around there. And then you're in Phoenix and the desert, and the landscape is completely different.
Oh yeah.
Every couple hours drive. It was a really wonderful way to see America. And I actually booked myself too much. That I booked myself some ridiculous drives. But the beauty of having a motorhome is that when you're too tired to drive, you pull into a parking lot and you have a real bed.
Yeah.
To get some really solid rest.
God, amazing. I know that people that have seen these shows are floored. I mean, the RV concerts and the house concerts and even the small multimedia shows. Jim Jelvig, a friend of mine that's over in the UK, saw your show and was so excited to share this with his family. He's one of the first people that asked questions about this conversation I was going to have with you. Christian Celeron was another one that jumped in on some things, and I'll get to their questions in a second. But now that almost led you to a point where you got comfortable having to shift gears, right? So you're not just hopping on an airplane and rolling into an auditorium and having to set up with a band, but you can actually roll in, you got your projector, you got your screen, you got your Bose system, and you can go in and in an hour and a half, you're up and ready to go, and you don't have to depend on anyone for IT support or like line checks for the drummer or anything like that. Now with this pandemic, as far in terms of like economic viability, you're performing from your place, right? We've got to be socially distant, right? So I know you're doing some lessons online.
Yeah, I'm doing lessons, and I would really like to do the multimedia show, but I'm just fighting with software. Yeah. And I got a green screen, and I would need to project the films on that, but I'm having trouble with that. And then the idea in OBS, Open Broadcast Studio, which most people are using because it's free, I can get a video in the background, but starting and stopping and going to another one, I don't have a clue on that yet. But yeah, being independent and being in control of your income, for one thing. That first tour I booked myself. I had an agent in line, and the guy totally flaked. I go, oh, I mean, I've been motivated so many times by being pissed off by people that are not doing their job. I go like, all right, I'm going to do it myself. Yeah. So bam, 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 I booked 6 weeks, and it was really hard. I mean, I was the agent, the booker, the travel agent, booking all the motorhome parks.
the driver.
The driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. So I never did it again alone. But yeah, being independent. I tell people that at clinics, back in the day, everybody wanted to be Van Halen, all the guitar players. They had the poodle hair and the whole 9 yards. And that's great if you want to be in a band, but you got to realize that anybody can quit the band, and then you got to come up with other players, and you got to have subs, and you got to deal with all this stuff, which is fine, but you really need to have a solo show or a duo show on the side, so you can keep making money no matter what.
Yeah.
So that's what that's done for me. And I do that at clinics too. So my clinics are an entertaining show, but instead of telling stories between the songs, I'll talk about techniques and sounds and guitar nerd stuff.
Yeah, those are all things that can make them better guitar nerds, but ultimately the stuff that you have to communicate and educate people on are some of these things, like informative tips on how to save money on the road, and how to, be able to have economic viability by diversifying your performance, right? So trim it down, or you can do a duet or solo show versus a full band. I think expectations from people, right? When they think, I'm going to go see Jennifer Batten, people might be surprised when they first get to see one of your solo shows, because they expect you to have a band there, right? And they think, well, of course she's going to do like a whole set of Michael Jackson, right? But the cool thing is, like, you do a really great blend of like you've got a Michael Jackson segment where you talk a little bit about, the stories if people are up for it, but your performance where you do the segues, the montage of Michael Jackson stuff is freaking amazing. It's really, really cool. And you talk about the evolution of this moonwalk, right? And that's the moment, that's one of those moments where everybody, oh my God. And then they're just enwrapped in the tension, right? Because the video that's in sequence with what you're doing is really timed well. So it's not just like you're watching somebody's hands do this, but you've got a bunch of funny shit going on in the background, and it's a show, an entertaining show. I think we're at a time right now where more people that get hip to what you're doing to be able to book you for some of these private shows, because it may not be an opportunity for a while, right? Where large groups of people can get together in venues to go see music. But if you've got a house concert with 30 or 40 people that are really intent on appreciating this entertainment factor, as soon as one person sees one of your shows, they're instantly wanting to tell their friends about it. The word of mouth thing grows, right? So I'm hopeful that, I think Christian Celeron was the last house concert that I saw you do at his place, and he had a beautiful space set up and 2 levels, right? They had the balcony upstairs, and there were a good chunk of people, both musicians and just appreciators of great music, and that it's really good for people to introduce you to them, because what you have to offer is so different than any place else, and I'm excited to see how this evolution has gone for you, because I really think you've been able to monetize this thing from a distance using, distance learning and distance, performance. I think if people can monetize this in a way that they can book Jennifer Batten for a concert and have it be intimate, I think it's a valuable thing,
Well, and the kind of music I play, I mean, my solo stuff, I couldn't have a band in a house. Yeah. I mean, it would take up too much room, plus the volume of having live drums. And sure. Another motivation for me doing the solo shows is my ears are trashed from so many years of live shows, and a lot from playing with Jeff Beck, because it was such a loud show, that I can't play with a band without some kind of protection.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's actually more satisfying to me in a lot of ways, depending on the situation, to have control. I know when I'm playing with tracks that the band is rehearsed, and nobody's going to trip up but me, maybe. Yeah. So it's, I have a certain level of confidence when I go into a show like that, there's not going to be a train wreck.
Yeah.
Unless I have a stroke.
Don't do that, please. No strokes for you. I do want to talk, just a couple of people asked me about some of your favorite gigs. Like, do you have a Jeff Beck gig that stands out that, man, this is the pinnacle. This is the ultimate, the Everest gig that we did that I'll never forget?
There's a couple moments with Jeff. One, I couldn't explain why. And I remember he was really grumpy that day for some reason, but we were on some Italian beach town, like right on the water. And to me, it was the most magical thing in the world, to all the fans and the water, and beach towns in Italy are pretty magical on their own. Yeah. And I don't remember what town it was, but I was in heaven that night. And I remember also the third show we ever did was the Montreux Jazz Festival.
Oh, wow.
Which I was kind of tripping, because it's so much pressure. It'd be nice to have a dozen shows under your belt before you do something like that. And I remember very well that Jeff was nervous that day. He comes up to me after sound check and he goes, "I got to get a new sound." And I'm looking at him like, "Can I have your old one?"
Yeah. This is day of the gig. He wants a new sound, day of show.
Yeah.
Just whip that up.
I think it was just somewhere to disperse his anxiety about the show, and it was being filmed, so that's extra pressure too.
Oh, there's a live concert of that, right?
It wasn't ever released, but
seems like there's Montreux stuff on YouTube that I've seen of you guys.
Yeah, it could be.
I didn't know if it was a commercial release. Maybe it was,
no,
fan filmed, big old cam. But how about the MJ thing? I know the pinnacle that people talk about all the time is the Super Bowl, right? And there are all sorts of stories that you've told me about the Super Bowl show. But 1 billion people watched that, right? That was the
1.5 billion. Don't forget that half.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So, you want to share some anecdotes and don't leave out the fact that drummer didn't have any drumsticks to play with?
Oh man, I have not made that public, Kevin.
Oh, okay, just joking.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a different story I heard about. I asked what I couldn't touch.
One of the things, it was really exciting because I didn't know it was going out to 1.5 billion people, but I knew a hell of a lot of people would watch, and it was a one-off thing that would never happen again. And we designed the show just for that, 10 or 15 minutes or whatever it was. And there was different parts of the stage, maybe half a dozen parts of the stage, and we would rehearse. Somebody would say go, and there'd be a couple people with each part of the stage that was on wheels, and they would haul ass to the middle of the field and put the stage together to practice that, because you only have the time of a couple of Lay's potato chip commercials to put that together. So nobody's gonna, you don't want millions of people hanging out waiting. They didn't snap the stage together. So that was exciting. And also, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I know there's one segment where anything can happen live and there's no rewind.
Right.
And they would use stage smoke, and there's one point where Michael and I are both covered in smoke and you can't see either of us.
Okay.
Just for a second. But it's kind of funny because you don't know how the wind is blowing, and if you don't get enough, it doesn't look good enough, and if you got too much, it's too much. And another thing that was really shocking is when we first rehearsed in the empty stadium, the echo was so bad that the dancers couldn't dance.
Oh my God.
Because you got this empty stadium, you're in the middle of a bowl, and the sound is hitting the sides and coming back at you louder than it's going out.
Right.
And so I thought, wow, this is a disaster. I'd never been in a situation like that before. But the sound man figured out how many milliseconds delay he needed to set what we heard.
The monitors.
So we could play. Yeah.
And nobody's using in-ear monitors at that point. That's all stage monitors, right?
God, so long ago, I don't remember.
Okay, yeah.
Really don't remember.
But, God, well, and that where was that venue? Was the state the
Pasadena Rose Bowl?
Oh wow, okay, cool. I do remember the Jackson impersonators jumping up, right, popping up at the.
Oh yeah. It's funny because I didn't get the memo.
No.
I had no idea what was going to happen and didn't even think about it until we were live, because we only rehearsed our part, right? And so in the beginning, you hear the announcers and blah, 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 blah. And in my peripheral vision, I saw there was an impersonator that popped out of the scoreboard and in a big ball of smoke and struck a pose. I go, I'm staring, you can see me in the video just staring at like, damn. And then boom, on the other side of the stadium, there's another one that pops up. And one thing I kind of regret on Michael's behalf is when we would do live shows, and he entered the stage differently depending on what tour, but there was one way, they called it the toaster, where somebody would hit a switch and this platform under the stage would pop him out. He'd be 2 or 3 feet up in the air and then land and just stand there, and people would lose their minds.
Yeah. And
he could do that for minutes. Wow. And people would be screaming their heads off, and then he'd just take his sunglasses off and they'd start all over again, losing their minds.
Oh my God.
Well, in a football stadium where people are there for the football number one.
Oh yeah.
He was just standing there and starting the show.
Oh no.
And honestly, not that day, but a few days prior, there was something about him that just kind of hit me as he's nervous. He's nervous about this. His vibe just seemed a little scattered and unusual. And I mean, Jesus, there's so much pressure. It could be a career ender. Right. Honestly, if you do a face plant or something, it's like, and this is before the internet, it'd be around the world in a heartbeat. So I felt for him. I mean, even when I was with Jeff, there's so many times I was thankful it wasn't my name on the what do you call it, marquee.
Yeah.
because it's a hell of a lot of pressure, especially with his show that's improv. Because if you're not feeling right, it really affects your timing, your ideas, and on and on and on. So yeah, there are a lot of behind the scenes stories of the Super Bowl. I couldn't even tell you what teams were playing that day. I had no interest in
Right.
football.
My personal, I'm a football guy, but like Prince's Super Bowl halftime show was my all-time favorite. Not to discredit what Michael did, but
Yeah.
I was thinking about like how much of an influence he was on me, how influenced he was by Michael. Do you know if there was much camaraderie between those two, Prince and Michael Jackson?
I wasn't ever around both of them. I was backstage at we did 3 shows in an arena in LA, and I was backstage warming up, and I saw Prince walk by me with Sheila E. and Kat, I think, and they were decked out, man. They were wearing like the uniforms.
Yeah.
It was just awesome. I'm sure there was a bit of rivalry. Because they were the top 2 guys, and
Right.
I'm sure they were looking at each other like, what's he doing? What's he doing? And hopefully being inspired by each other's shows. But yeah, I wasn't privy to that. I never hung out and talked to Michael about it.
That'll be a Tarantino movie that he can take the speculation and do something. Actually, yeah, Spike Jonze, he'll do that.
Yeah.
Spike Lee joint. Sorry, not Spike Jonze. But I think one let me ask a couple of questions real quick, because I know that people had asked a few things of you. Jim Jelvik, actually, let's see, he says, Jennifer, recording albums seems to be frustrating because people often don't pay for it. On the other side of the coin, it's your history and your legacy, and it can help draw out the live crowds. What do you think between having to give it away and how it lends itself to bring an audience in for live shows?
Giving away is fine if somebody else pays for it. Yeah, I am not a glass half full about that whole thing. And people ask me, when's your next record coming out? And I go, it ain't. My last record, I paid at least $10,000, and that's just to get it mixed and mastered, and I recorded everything at home. I did hire a few people, but I mean, just the idea that people can get it all for free and they don't think twice about it. I might as well give each fan $5 here.
Right.
Take it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all shifted so much, and it just occurred to me recently with the shutdown that our new jobs is to make ourselves popular. And you got to do that with social media and being online and constantly saying, what about me, Twitter, YouTube, all this. And there's part of me that really hates that.
Yeah. Car salesman.
I spend so much time not playing guitar. It'd be another thing if I had somebody hired that could do all that crap for me. But editing these films for the stories that I'm doing on YouTube is very time consuming. And then of course I have 2 ideas at once, so I'm putting out guitar riffs, and it'll take me 5 minutes to do the riff and an hour to edit it.
Right. Yeah. So, you need the personal assistant.
Yeah, well, there ain't no money coming in, so that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So, but I do enjoy when people send me stuff to work on. In fact, after this, there's a Polish Jimi Hendrix festival that happens every year called the Thanks Jimmy Festival. And they want me to record some stuff it's going to launch on May 1st, when they normally would gather in the square. And they try to beat their record every year on the most guitar players live in one place playing Hey Joe.
Wow.
And they get like 6, 8, 10,000 people in this square. Wow. The pictures are just unbelievable. And they all have guitars. And obviously we can't do it this year. So we're all filming ourselves and let somebody else edit that. Here's the raw footage, go.
No kidding. Have you done that one live with them?
I will be online on May 1st. It's it's heyjoe.pl.
Okay.
For Poland.
I was wondering, in the past, did you actually go there in Poland to play that live? You've done it live with the 5,000 people, and
I've done it twice.
That's pretty intense, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the US Festival or Burning Man. It's people love it and they go every year, and there's more and more people that go every
Wow.
year. I mean, just wanting to break the record is part
Yeah.
of people's motivation. Let's break the record from last year. And it's a good hang. There's always some really great players, and I love getting turned on to players that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah.
Players all over Europe and Scandinavia. There's just monsters. In fact, there was a guy, actually, I think he was American. He's from New York, and I cannot remember his name, but he's a Jimmy guy. He does a tribute show, and he smoked it. He was so good. So yeah.
Man, that there anybody else out right now? I knew that there was the Brad Paisley phase that was just rocking your world, right? You're a Brad Paisley fan in all sorts of ways, and there's great footage from October 18th, 2012 of you at the Verizon Amphitheater, Verizon Wireless Amphitheater in San Diego. Brad getting you up on stage and showcasing you for the end of the set.
Yeah, that's a long story, but yeah, I ended up playing on his encore track called Alcohol.
Yeah.
And
big single.
For me to not show up with a distortion pedal was super stupid because I'm plugged into a cowboy amp, right?
Yeah.
It's like no sustain. I'm like, oh God. And I remember he did it at one part in his solo. We were trading solos, and he played with a beer bottle,
Okay.
which of course makes sense for the song.
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't have a slide, but I can slide the guitar neck against the mic stand. So I go up to the mic stand. It was a total disaster.
Oh no.
And the mic stand was had his microphone on it. So I think he heard me laughing my ass off when I just tried to slam the guitar strings up against the mic stand, and he was out in front of me, but I was laughing right into his mic. They were in his in-ears. Yeah, anything that can happen live. That's why we all get a little nervous before we play.
Or you just get really good at adapting and roll with it, right? Because
you have to.
Yeah, man. I mean, you can't train wreck and not be able to chuckle, right? So that some of the other questions like Christian had asked, I think his one sec, he was asking about just how you and I met, whether we toured the world. We did not tour the world. I know I mentioned the story about how you contacted me. How long ago? So it was 2004 that you reached out to me, and the handful of gigs we did that World Guitar Congress in Baltimore. We did a warm-up show for it here at the Roseland. We did that. We did that live rehearsal in the back room. And
right, yeah. Wow, I don't remember all these, but now
I just found footage of all that stuff. It was crazy. Yeah, it was filmed on. I've got a DV cam that's. I think I filmed the original stuff on the Sony, and the playback on a Sony and a Canon are different, so I can't digitize it all till I get a Sony deck. But I found that footage and got the footage from the Baltimore show. There's some old, really shitty resolution stuff from the Baltimore show, of course, that are out there. But that was an amazing gig, man. Because I remember it was Eric Johnson, John Schofield were out there, and remember Schofield at breakfast, just like eating up all these stories.
I love that story. We ended up in a bar. I ended up at a table with Pat Martino and John Schofield and Pat's wife. And it was so funny because here I'm with these jazz monsters, and they only wanted to talk about Michael Jackson. It's like,
right.
Wait a minute. Shouldn't we be talking about diminished scales or something?
Right. Yeah.
It was just so surreal.
But Schofield was a huge Beck fan. I remember him just wanting to know it all, right, about your Beck time.
Okay.
But Eric Johnson too was a fan of your playing. I remember him just making a comment about, because he was so demure, so quiet, and but he said something about your tone, and I'm like, dude, you're the tone guy. Like, I mean, your tone is unique, Batten. I mean, you've got a great blend of what I hear you being inspired by with Beck, but also having your own vibe. But, everybody that is a tone fanatic knows Eric Johnson is the dude. And the fact that he was paying it out, to you and other cats there was fun. Dick Dale was that night too. Remember that?
I've seen him a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember him being there, but then my memories are so scrambled.
That's all right.
And Andy Summers was there too.
That's right. Yeah. God, Man, were you a big like Andy Summers fan?
I was a big Police fan.
Yeah, yeah.
Huge, still am. Yeah, man. That's the only concert I ever went to without a ticket because it was sold out. Just hoping I could get one, and I did. And it was just like I can't not see the Synchronicity tour.
Oh, that was the tour. Wow.
Yeah,
Jesus, man. I would have given anything to see that tour. That
yeah.
was a game changer record.
It was brilliant. I actually broke my knee in during Synchronicity. That song playing it in a cover band.
Oh God. So you've broken it more than once.
I've had knee trouble for quite a while. That I dislocated it several times, but that time I jumped on stage, like jumping into the bridge, and when I landed, the knee dislocated and fractured, and you know,
God.
25 years later, I had to get a knee replacement because of the scarring and arthritis that happened from that. Yeah, we are fragile beings.
Yeah, it's the truth, man. I mean, really, people don't expect full contact sport to be on stage the way that you did it, right? But you know, if you've seen you live, you're animated, you're moving around, you're still doing your thing, even if you don't have a big fiber optic helmet on, you know. But I'm looking forward to seeing what comes up with shows, you know, this summer. Hopefully, there's an opportunity, whether you do it online or whether you're doing a little bit more, you know, sort of smaller scale intimate shows. But anybody that might have questions to contact you about booking you for house concerts or lessons, they could probably do that through your website.
Yeah, right? And now that you're saying that, if there's any nerds out there watching this that could help me out with OBS Studio, it's man, I am watching endless tutorials of guys say you just go in this folder and click that, and I do it, and it doesn't work. And just being able to do a film show on green screen. In fact, I just discovered a cool app last night. That's an iPhone app that checks out your green screen and shows you problem areas of the lighting. So I'm getting into being a nerd and not playing guitar because I'm working on video software.
Yeah. It'll help the package, the performance package for sure. This is the time to do it while we got the time, right?
Well, you know, I saw Andy Timmons. I toured with him a couple of years ago, and he's doing a lot of concerts online on stageit.com.
Okay.
And I listened to one. I forgot about it, and I was walking my dogs, and I go, oh crap. I tuned in a couple minutes late, and the sound was amazing.
Really?
Just superb. I mean, the picture's still shit, just same as OBS. It's super compressed and fuzzy, but the sound was really, really good. And like, people don't know, but you asked if I would play today, and I checked out. I did a test on Zoom, and it's just crap. It's just super warbly. So not gonna happen.
No, that's well, what they have to do is just get a chance to see you at one of your live concerts. The piece that I asked you to play, it's one that I've seen a bunch of times. Man, I've gone to so many of your shows, and I try to sit right up front. I'll push people the hell out of the way so I can get up front. And it's there's a goosebump moment during like Catfight that you have your solo thing at the end that is mind blowing. It's so badass. And
oh, thanks.
Yeah, man, it's so fun. And I'm always like trying to fumble with my phone because I don't want to distract anybody by get my shit out to shoot you. And since I'm sitting right up front, I don't want to, you know, put my camera in front of your face without, you know, bothering too much. But you know, you're pretty much used to me embarrassing myself in front of you anyway. So I'm trying to get the good footage of Catfight, and if I find it, I'll post it in the links here. But you can get Catfight and off of your second record, Above, Below, and Beyond, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first record. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can get all those records, the Momentum record and your whatever record. You can get all those through your website. You can get the Share Batten the collaboration you did is badass too, because that's not all instrumental. It's sort of like anthemic, you know, progressive rock. You know, reminds me of just like, you know, the most sort of the best of commercial rock and progressive rock at the same time. You know, he's in Chicago, right? That guy?
Yeah. Well, most of the songs on that record were written by Jim Peterick from the band Survivor that did Eye of the Tiger. So it sounds like that era.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Love it.
Yeah. It was a fun project to do.
Well, you've got all sorts of swag, not just the music that you can buy, but I know you're selling your string dampers, and you've got some of your publications and all sorts of stuff. So if you're a guitar fan, hit up jenniferbatten.com, right? And
Yeah.
they can book Skype lessons with you. They can book house concerts and everything in between.
Yeah, and if anybody wants sessions, I got my laptop right here, ready to go.
Awesome.
Doing one in about a half hour.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll let you prep for that, but it means a lot for you to take the time. I'm really grateful that we have this time now to, shoot the breeze and share Jennifer Batten with the rest of the world.
Yeah, and welcome the world to the new podcaster, Kevin Rankin.
I'm really fortunate to have friends like you that I'm amazed by, I'm inspired by. You got a lot to offer, a lot of people. So I'm glad that people can jump on board. So thank you for the time, JB. I love you.
All righty.
All righty. We'll talk soon.
If anybody that's still on there, I'm doing my own Facebook Live on my music band page on Tuesdays at noon Pacific time.
Excellent. Post a link in the chat on this, Jen, and then people can jump over to that one.
Okay.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, guys.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good one. Take care,
All right.
JB.
Bye.